is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Mathias Ihlenfeld by Mathias. By Mathias is Mathias's coaching and advisory platform, where he works with founders, business owners, and executives on clarity, leadership, growth, and building scalable businesses without losing themselves in the process. Mathias, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hal, for having me on your podcast today. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Great. So for listeners who may not know your story yet, can you walk us through your journey as an entrepreneur and what shaped your approach to building businesses?
Yeah, I think, as you might hear, my accent gives it slightly away. Originally from Europe, more specifically, grew up in a small town outside of Frankfurt, Germany. And my parents had this dream of me playing in Wimbledon one day. And so they invested heavily into me becoming a tennis player. And didn't make it to Wimbledon, but I boarded a flight in Frankfurt with the destination of Monroe, Louisiana. And I ended up playing tennis at a college in Louisiana. And that's how my journey started here in the US. I only wanted to stay for a couple of years, end up getting my undergraduate business degree, did fairly well, got my MBA at the University of Alabama, and was offered a job. And I decided to stay in the States. And that was, roughly 25 years ago. So got into business consulting, worked for IBM, SAP, help businesses solve systems, processes. And then in 2014, I started my entrepreneurial journey. That's probably the one thing we wanted to talk about today. So
what was your background before launching and advising companies? What led you into that?
Well, I think one of the, obviously the big story for me was the opportunity to launch Woom bikes here in the US, right? Woom is a company that started in 2013 out of a small garage in Vienna, Austria. And my brother had started the business and we talked and he said, "Hey, you want to try this out in the US?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's give it a shot." So he sent a birthday present to me here in Austin, Texas, a bike for my son, Luca. He was just barely a year old. It was a balance bike. And as soon as I saw the bike, Hal, I knew it was going to be something special. And so my son starts riding around the neighborhood and my neighbor flags me out and he's like, "Hey, where did you get this bike? Your son's having such a good time. Beautiful bike. Love it. I want one for my daughter too." So I ended up calling my brother and asked him, "Hey, can I have another bike? I want to sell it to my neighbor." And sure enough, I sold my first bike without even trying. And I said, "Look, it seems like a slam dunk. I want to try this out in the US." And so I launched Woom Bikes here in Austin, Texas in 2014. And I started that selling bikes to families all across the United States. And it was one of those things where there were a lot of naysayers that said that, well, you can't sell bikes online directly to kids or to parents. And so there was a lot of naysayers early on, but I obviously proved them wrong. We were the fastest growing kids bike brand in the United States. We grew from zero. I bootstrapped the business to over 20 million in revenue within 5 years. Was on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing businesses 3 years in a row, and really built something that was really special. So it was one of those things where I didn't know what I was going into, and it ended up being a very, very successful venture. So yeah, now we are sort of a household name in the US and in Europe. Yeah.
Looking back, what are some of the biggest business lessons you learned from building businesses yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons for me was that I thought that just because I had a great product and I had a great brand, that I underestimated how hard it was to actually create awareness and to actually create traction in the market. The first year, Hal, I sold 13 bikes. And I was like, well, that's not going to work, right? And I pivoted quite quickly, The second year, I sold 1,500 bikes. So that's roughly $500,000 in revenue. Grew another 300% to 1.5 million in revenue, and then grew another 300% to 4.5 million in revenue. But the big learning was for me that I really had to be creative, resourceful in really creating awareness. So talking about relevance and resonance in the market, right? How do I reach the right customer, my ideal customer, and how do I convey to them that our product is one that they should trust, right? And so that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned. The second lesson was I never had enough money. I never had enough capital because we were growing so much, right? Think about we a very capital intensive business growing from 500,000 to 1.5 million to 4.5 million to 12 million, right? You grow so fast and so much year over year that I always had to be very creative on how I would fund this high growth business, right? So that was a second lesson. And the third lesson is how important my team was. Because at the beginning, yes, I was the hero. I was doing everything, right? But then soon after, I had to bring in the right people to help me with running that high growth business, to support me with the purpose of, inspiring millions of children to fall in love with cycling, and to be very passionate about what we were doing. And that was something that was new to me. Building a team, building the right culture, and bringing them all together to work toward our goal.
Great. So what are the key lessons you've learned from advising startups and founders? What did you pick up there?
I think number one is, for me, the reason why I wanted to actually work with other sort of business owners and entrepreneurs was because my journey was quite challenging. It was one of those lot of lessons learned, right? I wish, Hal, I would have had a better roadmap. I wish I would have had other people helping or advising me when I was going through these difficult times, right? And I frankly didn't have that. I mean, I had some people that helped me, but I wish I had somebody who had been through this process before, who knows or would have advised me against hiring the wrong people, would have helped me bringing in the right people, building leadership teams, finding good sources of capital, for example, or helping me just avoid making mistakes. So I think part of my journey was to really learn from what I've built. And now I feel like I don't want to build another company. I don't want to do that again. My calling is more toward helping other founders and business owners reach their goal. And I think all those lessons that I've already outlined, right? It's about people, culture, money, go to market, logistics, sourcing. I mean, I want to help other people avoid making mistakes and help them with what I've learned, because I've built a $20 million business. I bootstrapped that. I led a $100 million business after it was merged. So there's a lot of learnings I have, and that's what I want to convey to others.
So how has your perspective changed from being an operator to now coaching and mentoring other founders?
I think number one is, this reminds me a little bit of my time as a consultant prior to running a business, right? I was a consultant for like 15 years. And it's just about, obviously, when you're a coach or consultant or advisor, you are not obviously the owner of the business, right? You're not taking on the risks. You're not accountable or responsible for everything. So I think for me, it's about having enough empathy for the owner or for the business owner or for the entrepreneur to really understand what really they need and to what extent and degree I need to offer the guidance and the support, right? And I'm not a person that comes in and would tell you, Hal, you need to do X, Y, and Z and all that. No, I'm more of a person that comes in and I ask a bunch of questions and I'll help you go from point A to point B through like a discovery method, right? So that's more of my approach, knowing that I also have a lot of lessons learned and a lot of experiences through my time. Yeah.
So, what role does mentorship and coaching play in startup success?
I think it's huge. And I think you see this with the success of some of those accelerators that are out there, right? I mean, I think you know a bunch of accelerators. The reason why accelerators typically are successful is because the entrepreneur and the founder is being surrounded by a lot of expertise, experience, and wisdom, right? And I think not everybody can get into an accelerator, or not everybody wants to be in one. But I do think that, and you know this, right? I mean, when you have a lot of experience and expertise, why not access it, right? As a founder, if you talk to somebody who has built a 20, 25 million and ran $100 million business, why not leverage that and ask them what worked and what didn't work? Because there's a strong likelihood there's going to be a lot of similarities, right? I mean, business is, at the end of the day, is business, right? I mean, yes, there's all kinds of different nuances around it, but why not ask and surround yourself with other people who have been there, done that, and help you with getting from point A to point B much more quickly and also with less pain?
Right. So how do you see the current state of the Texas startup ecosystem?
I think, for me, I'm very excited what's happening in Texas. I mean, first of all, of course, we have, I think it's like what, the four largest cities in the country out of the top 11, right? So 4 out of the top 11 countries, right? Did I get that right, Hal? Is that?
That's right. There's a lot of people moved to Texas in the last 10 years and continue to do so. So yeah, growth is certainly on the menu.
Yeah, and I heard around, like, I think Gary Forney talked about this. There's like 1.5 million college students in the vicinity of 250 miles of Austin. So, I mean, everywhere I seem to look, and of course, I'm also very plugged in, right? I mean, I'm part of a lot of different circles. I think it's really, really inspiring to see what's happening. Part of what I love about Austin is that there is a lot of stuff happening. It's almost like I have a lot of FOMO because I feel like I'm missing out on stuff, right? To answer your question, I feel great about it. I think there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of ideas. And I feel like that's a very, very inspiring to see that.
And so what's the biggest change you're seeing in the ecosystem right now?
I see the creation of communities. I think what I've seen lately is there's more and more communities that are being created to come together to support entrepreneurs and businesses. I mean, you obviously, your organization, then we obviously we have Fiesta, you have Skew, you have C10, you've got UT doing a bunch of stuff. I mean, I'm leaving out a lot of things, a lot of different groups, but I sort of see a big momentum in communities and groups that are trying to get together to help each other, which I think that's a good thing. But it also feels very, very fragmented, right? Because there are so many groups, and so it's also very, very hard for us as investors or coaches or advisors to kind of keep tabs of it all, because we can't be at all those different events at the same time because there's just so much happening.
And so where do you see the Texas startup ecosystem going over the next 5 years?
I see continued growth and continued innovation, and it's also a very diverse place, right? We have a lot of CPG activities here. We got a lot of tech activity here now with a lot of the space programming and the military, and there's just a lot happening. So I do see continued influx of people coming here and starting to take advantage of the networks and the community here to continue to build and create. That's my gut feeling. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's talk about fundraising, one of my favorite topics. What do you find are the most common challenges founders face when raising early stage capital in today's market?
Well, I mean, what is it? VC10 looks at 800 deals a year and invests in 6.
Yeah, that's not good odds for the startup founder.
I do think, though, that I would almost look at it the other way around, right? Why do 794 companies, why are 794 not getting funded?
Good question. how can founders better position themselves to be investor ready for that?
That's exactly right. Right. And so I think I see that quite a bit with what I'm doing with Birthing of Giants, where we're talking a little bit more about the middle market, but private equity has a lot of money on the sidelines, but they are finding fewer and fewer deals out there. And so I do think, and we can get into that in a little bit, but I think for the startup, my opinion is that, yes, you need to be the whole package. You can't just have a good product. You need to have a great story. You need to know your numbers. You have to know how to interact and follow up with people. And so I think it's a whole package that you as the startup founder need to have the awareness of what is the investor looking for, right? So does the startup, for example, pull me aside after a pitch and say, let me take 20 minutes and ask you what worked and what didn't work? Like the other day we were at the event, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we gave some feedback, but I would have been very honest and open in giving some feedback. But sometimes that feedback loop isn't always there, right? So I think it's what's the best way to make yourself investor ready? And even asking, do you actually need an investor early on in your startup phase? Right? That's something I'm very passionate about. I write about quite a bit because I bootstrapped a $20 million business. So that's something where, like, well, instead of focusing all your effort on trying to raise funds, could you raise funds alternatively, right? Without giving up equity and actually focus on building and continue to grow your business until you get to a point where you have proven yourself, where you have traction, and then all of a sudden your pitch and your story will be so much more compelling.
So when you evaluate a company, what stands out to you as a strong founding team?
For me, number one, the problem that the team is solving needs to be real. Oh, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Number two, I need to have a very authentic group of leaders who understand also the big picture and that are also vulnerable enough to admit that they may not know something. So I think for me, it comes down to authenticity because I'm early stage. I'm investing not in the product. I'm placing a bet on you as the founder, on you as the team to take this to the next level, right? And that's what you need to tell me. That's what you need to convey to me is, do you have what it takes? Because we all know it's very, very difficult to scale and grow a business to the next level. So I need to feel really good about the person that's behind the wheel.
Good. So let's talk about growth and scaling. What trends are you seeing right now around the startup growth and scalability?
The trends I see is that, well, first of all, the problem statement is that it is very, very difficult to move out of no man's land. And no man's land is, I'll call it between 3 and 10 million. So you, the hero, have started the business, you built something, you get it to 2 or 3 million, but now it's about what other support can you bring in, right, into the organization that helps you continue to grow and scale the business. Because likelihood that when you're at 5 million or 6 million, you need to bring in 2 or 3 key players, right? But are you able to really bring in 2 or 3 key players at the same time? It's unlikely. Otherwise, your financials are going to be pretty, and it's hard to bring in 2 or 3 key players at the same time, right? So how do you prioritize around bringing in the right people? And how quickly can you get them to integrate and be aligned with what you want to accomplish? So in other words, it's about team building. So really what I see is a struggle to move from a hero-led business into a more scalable business by building the right team and having the right people actually execute the strategy to move and scale the business in a scalable way.
Great. So what tells you a business is actually ready to scale?
I think readiness to scale, I mean, there's some fundamentals, of course, right? You need to, I talked a little bit about people, so I think that already we checked the box on, right? Second, Second is, okay, do you sort of have also the systems and the processes in place that allows you to do this effectively, right? I mean, it's about doing small things in the right way, right? In an efficient way. And I think that's where sometimes people get caught up. Maybe they want to go too fast, right? And I think speed is important. But sometimes I also see when people try to move too fast, too quickly. And that almost happened to me, right? I grew from 4.5 million to 12 million. One thing would have gone wrong and I would have been down and out. So there's a little bit of luck involved as well. But I also say surround yourself with the right people as well at this point, check in with other people who have been there, done that, get advice, work with others, because likely it's something like this has been done before, and I think you can learn from others. Yeah.
Right. So, what's your advice for first-time entrepreneurs entering today's market?
It's not just about your product or the service. I think that's probably maybe 10, 15, 20%. It's about your ability to learn and grow along with the business and find traction. I think I think somebody said that. Who said that? That sales solves everyone's problems.
I think the message is revenue solves all problems because you can always find the solution, I guess.
I think, so many times I see founders that have a great product or they have a great service, they pitch and whatever they did, try to noodle around on it and trying to refine it and define it. But no, you need to go out there, go to market, get traction and show that this is working and make sure that there are customers out there who are falling in love with the solution to the problem that that you're offering, right?
Right.
So is the solution is there a real problem that your product is solving? And then how do you actually bring it to market? And how do you treat your customers and how do you manage your customers going forward? This is sometimes I feel also very passionate about is you need to have the full offering. It can't just be a product or service. It also needs to be, you need to take care of your customers, right? They, because they're going to become your biggest fans. They're going to be word of mouth, right? So
what is your perspective on the future of innovation and investment in Texas, for example?
I'm very bullish and excited about what's happening in Texas. Of course, I'm probably a little bit more plugged into Central Texas here. And I do know this, it sounds a little bit strange. We talked earlier about there's I feel like there's a lot of money on the sidelines and not, we as investors sometimes have a little trouble finding the right play. So we talked about earlier the 6 out of 800. And I talked to some other fund manager the other day. He was talking about he only invested in 2 out of whatever it was, 200 businesses. So I think I see likely that more and more businesses are being created or that are being started. But what we're seeing is that the majority are not getting really funded. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in the last minutes that we have here today, what should we cover that we haven't?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about startups, and I think that the other opportunity that I see out there is around the middle market business, right? So companies, I don't know, between 5 and let's say $100 million. Those are companies that also need some help. Some of them need some help, and I think that's one of those things that I'm passionate about is to help business owners that run a middle market business to get them to grow and scale more profitably and get them ready for successful exit. And I think that that's what we do at Birthing of Giants so well. We create a quarterly a meetup where we bring in like-minded business owners and we work together for a day on their business and really helping them understand what are sort of buyers looking for, and how can you prepare your business for a better exit? And that's something that there are not a lot of options out there to help business owners. So that's something that I feel very passionate about. And we also have quite a few tools available that will allow that business owner to really prepare themselves for a better exit, right? So because private equity, there's a lot of money on the sidelines, and there's fewer businesses ready to be bought. But which goes along with what we talked about earlier, Hal, was about, okay, how ready are you, and how positioned are you to be a really a good target for somebody, right? And so we help businesses prepare themselves better for that potential acquisition.
Well, I appreciate that. So how should listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think it's very simple. I can find me on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the easiest thing nowadays, right? So Mathias Ihlenfeld, I'm at LinkedIn. You can also Google me. And of course, we can add my email address. It's matthias@matthiastx.com. And yeah, be happy to talk to anybody about anything we spoke about today.
Great. So we'll include all your contact details in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Hal. This was great.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Halty Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.